You know what I
Well,
mean?
unfortunately, this time right now is really kind of exposing people because some
Totally.
people just can't take it, so they've
Can.
got to, so
And
whatever,
they
like,
use all kind of excuses.
oh yeah, so whatever mask they might have been wearing before, it's like it doesn't work anymore. Like
It
all that stuff.
doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
So hi, Desiree.
Hi, good
Let me know.
afternoon.
Let me know when your computer is
Yeah,
ready.
I'm good.
You're
I'm
ready.
good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So hi. Thank you for accepting my invitation and welcome.
Thank you.
This is another episode of World Culture, which is a podcast that I started in April during the coronavirus time because I wanted to connect with the creatives, talk about what is going on, what are the challenges that we're facing, how to move forward, how to make it a better place for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I would like to first ask you to introduce yourself. I know
Sure.
you are, I would say, I don't know you. This is kind of getting to know each other, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But from what we spoke, I know that you are a dancer, choreographer, and an entrepreneur. And I am very happy that we are connecting because we are members of the African diaspora, and I would like to talk about what does it mean for people like us.
Yes.
So welcome,
Definitely.
and let me know
Thanks so
about
much
you.
for thanks so much for having me on and for reaching out. I mean, it's always great for someone, that's a peer to reach out through social media and say, hey, I like what you're doing and I would like to connect. So I appreciate that. So let's see. So I am originally from outside of Boston, Massachusetts. That's where I grew up. And from an early age, I started dancing. So that's my, I guess, first pathway into the arts was as a dancer. And so I basically trained at a local dance studio. And, I'll say that I was pretty much the only Black child, at this dance school. And also probably the only Black child that, sorry, I really,
I think I lost my audio with the headphones, so go
I,
ahead.
okay. So
Oh no,
growing
it's
up
there.
in that type of community, which was pretty much, all white, I had to really have a strong sense of self. And so one of the things that I want to say about my dance teacher, Sherry Gold, is that she really was ahead of her time and knew what I needed as a Black child in the arts. So she always made sure that I was able to have someone that I could look up to, representation. So one of the older ladies that was in the company, she would come and take class, so that I could see someone that had a body like me and that I could look up to. She also made sure that I knew about companies like Alvin Ailey and got me a chance to like study with some other people, and also the music. Like she always was very open to me like bringing in music that I heard at home, but she also was a lover of music. And so I think that especially when we're talking about now being more diverse in our curriculums in school, and that means across the arts discipline, that that's how you do it. And this was like over 30 years ago, and she was doing it then. And so she's passed away now, but I just really was thinking about that, as I've been thinking about how things are so different now, that she really paved the way for me to be successful. So from
Let me
that
ask
time.
you a question about what you just said.
Sure.
Um, that I relay a lot because it happens to me that I was kind of, I would say my background was more diverse, but honestly, I always felt that I was in a predominantly my kind of people kind of environment because it was mixed, but I don't know. I relate to this story. So can you explain what does it mean to being the only Black person in a white environment, not taking it as a victim? You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean?
Well, and that's funny that you say that, because I've been trying to put my thoughts around COVID, the new civil rights movement, and all of the and just the arts community, like our arts community is hurting. So, I haven't really even been able to verbalize it, but I think now I'm able to. The way that I grew up, I went to school and that was my second education. My parents were really great about making sure that I knew where I came from. So I had a lot of oral tradition in my home where my parents would share stories about their childhood growing up in the segregated South. I heard things from my grandparents. Also, being a latchkey kid, meaning my parents worked during the day. So I would come home by myself after school and have to, do my chores, do my homework, and, whatever. But my next door neighbor, Mrs. Jackson, who was an older woman, she kind of was like our babysitter. She was, from the segregated South too, and had a lot of stories, and so through that, that was my first education. So I was always empowered, and of course, as a minority, your parents will tell you, you can't just be good, you've got to be better, you've got to be 2 times as good to even be in the position. And I just really took that to heart. And I've always been very confident and like really confident in what I had to offer. So I never saw myself as a victim. If anything, I know that I was a leader in my community. Even in this white town, I know that I was a leader and that I was able to make things happen. Even I challenged some of my education, like that we didn't have like a lot of African American history, and that we were forced to kind of like learn about other people's history without learning mine. Sometimes the things that they would say about my history was inaccurate, so I would bring books in and say, hey, no, this is really how it goes down, and I would get into trouble. So I didn't care about that. I always knew that I was destined for bigger things, and so I kept dancing. I would go to dancing school after school, and that was really my world. And I was really cultivating myself to, break away, which I did. I ended up leaving my hometown, and I got my first job at a theme park, Busch Gardens. So I did that for a year. And then I kind of like bounced around like what most artists do. And I was doing like modern dance. So I ended up in Chicago for a season. And then I ended up in Philadelphia for a season. And then I ended up in New York. Once I was in New York, I stayed there for about 15 years. And through that time, I was able to really hit some really high benchmarks as a dancer and as a performer, making it to Broadway. Also like going on tour, getting a chance to go to Europe, and then also making the line of the Radio City Rockettes, which if your listeners don't know, the Radio City Rockettes are a world-renowned like kick line that has been around since like 1925. You'll see them, at the Christmas parades, Macy's Day Parade.
And an icon, a cultural icon of the American
cultural
culture.
icon, just like it's an American icon, just like apple pie. So that said, that in the beginning, there was no Black girls. So this organization from 1925 up until 1985, which is 60 years, was all white. 1985, they introduced their first Black girl. Okay.
Wow.
And then from that time until now, there's only been about 60 girls of color. That's it. So when you put it into perspective, a line of Rockettes is 36 girls, and there's 2 casts. There's one in the morning and one at night. So that's 72 girls. 72 girls a year for all these years, and we don't even have enough girls of color for like a season. We don't have 2 lines. We don't have 72 girls. So that in itself is like just a really huge thing. I mean, it's a huge thing just to even make it onto the Rockettes, but we're part of an even smaller set. So actually June 30th, which was Lena Horne's birthday, we launched the Rockettes of Color alumni. So it's a group of all the girls of color so that we can actually have a voice. We're not really trying to, most of us have moved on in our performing career, so we can actually take a stand and we can have solidarity for the things that are going on in the world right now, like Black Lives Matter. But also, I think that what's just as important is that we are role models for other girls of color to let them know that, yes, you can be here, and to share our story, because a lot of the history of us isn't even there. It's not presented, it's not like they were welcoming. It was like we were accepted, it was like they had to do it, and so finally, a lot of us, we've never even met each other. We're like 2 ships in the night, because when you are a performer of color and you're auditioning, maybe they need 10 girls. They're only going to pick 1 or 2 Black girls. So that's it. So you don't ever really get a chance to build like
There's a lot of competence, right? Among
A lot of
yourself.
competition, a lot of competition, really. So that said, you really
Competition.
don't get a chance to know a lot of the girls that are your same, same
Mm.
color, coming from the same background or whatever like that. So I'm really excited about that because it gives us an opportunity to share our stories, and they're just so unique. And so that's something that I'm really excited about being a part of and seeing how it can roll out and how we can educate people on, just what it's about and how we can normalize it. Like, it shouldn't be a big deal that there's Black Rockettes, but it is. So just normalizing that. So that's something to look out for. And, and now being in this set before this happened, and I know exactly when it did, March 15th was around the time that we really kind of was like, oh, we need to shut down. And that's also my birthday. So I had a lot of things planned for my birthday, but of course, none of those things, really happened. And, since then, it's really just been a day to day of like, okay, what's going to happen now? Before COVID, I was having some momentum with my entertainment company, like how you have your entertainment company. I have an entertainment company, Parkman Creative, and we basically do cultural programming, for events, festivals, conferences, private parties, or whatever. So we had just wrapped up Black History Month at the Olympia Theater, downtown Miami. So
Mm.
we were in position to kind of keep this going because it was very successful and it was something that was needed downtown Miami. But then, that got canceled, and so did all the other events. Like any other events that, you had going on, it just wasn't happening.
So let me ask you, what made you came to Miami? And what have you been doing here when it comes to
Um,
your career?
yeah, I've been in like South Florida for about 3 years. And, the simple short answer is that I love the weather. And I had a friend here. So, and he's a friend that I followed all around. He's been like my first mentor since I was 17 years old. So like, it just made sense to come here because I really wasn't sure like where else I wanted to go. I had already been in New York. I was in LA, and I think I was in
Mm.
Dallas. I had just finished a contract in Dallas. And,
Mm.
I don't want to have cold weather anymore. And then I just started looking for jobs. So my first job here was as a teaching artist at the Broward Center. So I spent like 2 years there working with their performance team as their choreographer. And then I moved a little bit further into Miami, and then I kind of just started freelancing. And so I was teaching at dance studios. You can hire me for master workshops for dance, business of the arts at colleges or whatever like that. So I kind of was just piecing things together. And then I really just, I had always been kind of like presenting performances and doing things like that, but I never really just like, I never really fully leaned into it. So I really decided that it was time to put all my skills to work and really just come on out with Parkman Creative and let it be a full service agency that serves, not just the audience, but the artists as well. So, one of the things that is my passion is really development of the artist and really helping them to have a long career, but also for them to thrive. Like, I don't think that as artists, we should have to have a lesser quality of life or not be able to have access to some of the same things because we chose this career path. So I work with a lot of like emerging artists and pre-professional and really just helping them with their foundations, whether it's like what types of work they should be looking for, maybe where they're going to be moving, going over their websites and bios, pictures, anything that is going to help them have confidence and be prepared to deal with like this business, which is really hard. And also, the business side of it, because I feel like a lot of like college programs and things like that, they don't always really give you the full picture, like it's all about like your practice and your craft and
Mm-hmm.
all that, which is great. But at the end of the day, you've got to sell
Mm.
something. You got to
Yep.
sell something to make money.
Totally.
So I merge the two. On the one hand, I love a good show. I want to put on a show. I want music. I want dance and singing and feathers and sequins. But then I also want to nurture you too. I want to nurture you. I want to make sure that your finances are in order. So that's kind of how Parkman Creative came to be. And now I'm really more focused on the one part, which is the development side, since we can't really do the event side. So I've been kind of like, adapting into that And then just really going back to what I always know, which is the studio, you know. So right now everybody's online. So I'm teaching classes online. You know,
I was gonna ask you, I will talk about it. How is it to teach dance online?
well, okay, it's not the best thing in the world, but I think that I've been doing like more privates. So one-on-one, I try to do things like where we have specific things that we work on. So for example, the student that I have, she is auditioning for a performing arts school. So there's a certain skill level and there's certain techniques and fundamentals that she needs. So it's easy for me to be able to see her body and the way that she's carrying herself. And, you know, you just have to have a good eye, you know? And I also think, excuse me, I also think that this is it's a good teaching thing for the kids, because if I'm not always there to just demonstrate and I'm just talking to you, you need to be able to translate it, okay? So, you know, as a teacher, you are taught to be able to explain things in different ways. So I can show you, and then, you know, maybe and then I can tell you, right? You need to be able to translate back and forth. So if I say, you know, do this across the floor, you know what that is. Like you know enough in your own vocabulary to be able to do it. So, you know, is it challenging? Yes. But this is the way that we have to do it now. And we want to keep the kids active. They still need to train. So sometimes maybe it's just conditioning. Like I have a lesson later today. She's going to do yoga. We're going to start, it's a ballet class, but we're going to start out doing yoga. And then today, just because I know she needs it, she's going to balance all day. I'm going to give her different drills to balance her arms, her legs, all these kinds of things, because she needs to be strong for point work, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to condition. The performance side, I actually have not, I haven't done an online like performance, and I really thought a lot about it. And I was going to do something live, like, I mean, I do like cabaret shows. And I really thought, you know what? I just don't want to see any more living rooms and stuff. And I know that there's backdrops and all that, but I think for me, I'm going to try to do it a little differently. You know, I'm not sure what that is yet, or don't want to speak on it just yet, but really just trying to.
We need to be creative in these moments, right? To make
Yeah,
it.
I think that all of this is giving us an opportunity to be innovators, you know? So I'm just looking at it like that, because that's really all we can control. Like, I cannot control this virus. I can't control the fact that, you know, Broadway is closed until 2021, which trickles down to all the regional theaters and all the clubs and all that, things like that. They're not going to be hiring shows, even small ones, you know, because of the capacity. So that said, you know, you just have to kind of like, you know, I say right now, grow with the flow, right? I'm growing with the flow. So I'm going with it, but I'm growing with it, and I'm growing into something else. And that's leading me to other things. Like, you know, right now in this time that I have, I'm getting my yoga certification, because that goes along with what I do anyway. You know, I teach dance, I do stretching, so might as well throw the yoga in there and just, you know, mix it all up, you know? So
Let me ask you about, let's go back a little bit to Broadway. How was the experience of Broadway for you?
right.
Like,
So again,
what was the show that you were performing?
okay, so again, so I mentioned this one, you know, I've basically been a part of the two, like, basically most European whitest organizations you could be a part of. So the Rockettes and the Great White Way, Broadway. So I was in a show called Annie Get Your Gun with the legendary Bernadette Peters and Tom Wopat. And it tells the story of Annie Oakley. Broadway, to me, it was great. I mean, it's a benchmark. What I will say is that I always felt a little bit on the outside of that community. I kind of saw how you can hit a wall with that, you know, like I wanted to have more control. So I always knew, even from that age, because I was like 25 when I got the first show. And I always knew that I wanted to be doing my own thing. Like, I wanted to be a producer. And even when I would try to find out, like, oh, could I, you know, shadow the company manager or do different things like that, it was always kind of met with like, well, why do you want to do that? You know? And I guess, again, so our show was a little special because we actually had 3 Black girls in the cast. And I give that credit to our director and choreographer, Graciela Danielle, who's Argentinian. And she really just was like, yo, I'm trying to get the most talented people, and that's it, right? And she also knows the culture. And so this was an opportunity for her to use her platform to hire the best people possible. And that just happened to be what it was. So we ended up having like a really special cast. So out of that show that lasted almost 3 years, I made some really great relationships. Like I'm still friends with a lot of the people in that cast. So, I know that that was a really special experience, because that's not always the case when you do shows, that everybody gets along and they become friends and it's all kumbaya, whatever. Um, I think that for me, being on Broadway is that I got a chance to be there. I know I'm part of a very small community of people that made it. And I knew that I would use that for my platform. Like that basically gives me credibility. Like I'm legit, right? I'm on the boards, I'm in the history books, and I appreciate that. I know that I'm part of a very special group, especially as a Black person. And to see now that there are a lot more Black people on Broadway winning awards, like Hamilton, that's going to be showing on Disney Plus tomorrow, whatever. Yeah, it's changing, but at the same time, they're still like way behind, like we still don't have Black Broadway producers and choreographers like we should. There's really no pathway of mentorship so that we can like have a seat at the table. Those are the kinds of things that I saw when I was on Broadway, that it just wasn't there, and so now, because of, Civil Rights 2.0, people are looking really closely at things. And so Broadway now is having to answer these questions about its own self. So we'll see like what happens on the other side, in 2021 when they come back. Like what will the changes be,
Let me ask you another thing that is related. I noticed, and I talked to a lot of dancer friends about the relationship that we in the Western culture have with the body. I think it's kind of contradictory, and I think it's part of what prejudice come from. Because I think a lot of people look at people that move as weird, as something exotic, as something they don't
Right.
know what to do with that. When you dance, you know that that's something natural. That's the
Right.
way of expression, right? So, but it's kind of, there are a lot of prejudice, I think, still about the body and the movement culture, right? What do you think about that? What is your
Well,
take?
I mean, okay, so two things. I think that a lot of that part about the body and the way it moves, it doesn't, that gaze doesn't necessarily shine on like, white women. It shines on Black women and like people from the islands, when they're doing reggaeton or they're doing twerk dancing or whatever. But all those dances have, roots in African tradition, and it's a release of the body and it's a grounded movement. And, even when you talk about carnival, I've heard people, judge the little kids that are able to get out there and do all that, but that is part of their culture, and they're not, because you're looking at it in a sexualized way, that's your
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah.
That's your problem. So I think that on the one hand, you have that. Now, what I think that we experience here as dancers of color in America is that you don't fit the perfect body type for what they feel is the European aesthetic. So, for example, we're not in the ballet world a lot because they feel like we are too muscular, our butts are too big, and that, and I was told that when I was young and I went to Boston Ballet to go and audition, and I was just going to audition basically for like just to get in for the training, and they said, well, maybe you should just take jazz class or something because you don't really have the body, your turnout isn't that great. And it's like, I don't want to be a ballerina, but I know that I'm trying to have a well-rounded arts educate my dance background, dance education. So, and that, I mean, this is what, for a long time, this is how, they would treat us and how they would tell us this. So for, you go through generations and not have any Black ballerinas. Now we have the resurgence of the Black ballerina, which, we know that Misty Copeland is kind of like the poster girl for, but there was so many people that came before her that were really chipping away at it, But even now, I mean, there's still a thing about body and who gets to dance and why, and it trickles over into, like I said, I'm doing yoga certification now. And even as Black women, there's that, you know, judgment too, like, oh, you're too big to do yoga, whatever. And it's like, no, yoga is for everyone. Movement
Yeah.
is for everyone. So I think that that is something that is going to change, because at the end of the day, if you're saying that my body type is not the aesthetic to do these things, but yet all of you guys is like, all the people that you look up to are out here getting injections and booty implants.
I
You see
know.
how it's like, you know, it's ironic.
So we don't even know what we are promoting by doing these things, right?
Right. Yeah. So, you know, part of what I do as an educator.
Normalizing, because
Yeah.
honestly, like here in Miami, being a woman, when you realize how many people go to surgery for because they don't like themselves or they don't.
Right. I didn't even listen when I moved down here. I had no idea that it was like out of control like that. But yeah,
Oh my God! Some days
surgery.
I'm like, am I right not to get into surgery? You know what
Yeah.
I
I
mean?
mean, it's like a rite of passage here. It's like, it literally is like a rite of passage. But, you know, part of the education, you know, with that I do, especially with the women, is to really, you know, let them know that their body is fine. Like, yes, we want to be healthy, but you do not have to try to fit into their mold, right? You do not have to do that. You need to love the body that you're in, and you have to work with what you have. You know, like, I've always been a taller dancer. So, you know, I would, you know, I could never have a partner, you know, like, they're like, well, you can't take partner in class. So I was always made to feel like less than, but I was like, that's cool. Cause guess what? Guess who'll be the soloist? Me.
Uh-huh.
That's who I'll be, the soloist. All right. I don't need a partner.
So it's kind of strategies that we need to use.
It can be if you look at it that way, but I also know a lot of women that went through that, and they had a lot of issues. You know, they had eating disorders, you know, depression, and some of them quit the business because of it. You know, like, they got talked out of the business. You know, and that's unfortunate. You know, that's really unfortunate. So we're trying not to repeat those same things again.
Let me ask you about the cabaret. I know that you also, develop these, and I'm very happy because I usually all I know about cabaret is from Cuba. In Cuba, cabaret was a thing
Oh
because
yeah,
of the
Tropicana.
background, the 50s and all that, right?
Yep.
And well, here I understand there's a big tradition of cabaret, and I wanted to connect it with the Harlem Renaissance because I
Yeah.
think that is coming back. I would like you to please talk a little bit about what is
Right.
cabaret, how does it
So
connect with the
I
cabaret?
know sometimes when you go further south, cabaret means strip club, but that is not really the real cabaret is not. Cabaret is really more of like a dinner theater. It's really more of like a supper club experience. So it's usually in a smaller venue with tables and a stage, and you have a
Yeah, like
band.
Le Moulin Rouge in France, right? It's kind of
Yes.
a
Or
Le
even like the
model.
Tropicana per se. I mean, the Tropicana in Cuba, it was a big show, like a
Yeah.
musical, but it's still kind of like, even when I went when I was in Cuba. So, you know, there's seats, you can have dinner. Right. So when I was in LA, I've always been fascinated with, you know, Harlem Renaissance. I love Josephine Baker. I actually did a show called Blackbirds of Broadway that went to Europe, and I kind of played her part. So I always thought to myself that I was wanting to do something like that. So when I was in LA, I just decided that this was the time, you know, and it really just felt right. I had a great group of people around me that I knew could facilitate my vision. So we had a great space in Hollywood, and we put it together. So I basically had, like, you know, characters like Cab Calloway. We had like a Lena Horne type person. We had like a Ella Fitzgerald type person,
Right.
Nat King Cole. And then we had like the jitterbug dancers. And then we had a couple of like burlesque dancers and things like that, tap dancers. And then in between, we would have a host that would kind of keep the show going. And then, of course, we had a full band. And that's one of my proudest moments, because it was really like a dream to get it going. And it was very successful. It ran in Hollywood for like a couple of years. We did the Fringe Festival and got written up as like, you know, must see type of show. And then we would also book it out for like corporate events and things like that. So when I moved here, I actually did the show at a venue in Del Rey. It was more of a bare bones version, you know, for budgeting reasons. But the goal is to really bring that show back to like a place like Faena. on the beach, because that's where it should be,
I
you
was
know.
gonna
And
say, fine. I went to a cabaret show there that was so cool. The place is
yeah, they've got some great
amazing.
shows there. And, you know, before this, I had been kind of inching my way and meeting people and talking and, you know, and getting a connection to actually being able to speak with someone about it. So we'll see what happens when this all blows over. But that is, to me, the pinnacle of doing a show here, you know, in Miami. You know, Miami doesn't really have a theatrical landscape, unfortunately. But I feel like for whatever time that I'm here, I want to try to bring it, because I know that there's an audience for it, because, you know, you've got an older crowd, you know, snowbirds, they're used to seeing live theater. And then just, you know, people that are my own age that want a different type of experience, you know. So you know, I have a couple of shows that I was planning to kind of like try to premiere. So just put it
Can
on
you
the back burner.
can you please explain a little bit of what Harlem Renaissance was?
Sure. So for those that don't know, so Harlem Renaissance was like this period in Harlem between like 1920s up until pretty much the crash, right? And you know, Black folks pretty much were migrating north from the South, you know, and looking for better job opportunities and things like that. And so Harlem just became a mecca of entertainment, of arts. You had people all in the same room: Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Langston Hughes, all the writers, you know, Lorraine Hainsbury, all these people that were contributing art, you know. And then you had the clubs: the Lennox Room, Lennox Lounge, Minton's Playhouse, the Cotton Club, you know, Sweetwater's, all these different places that you could commune and fellowship with your fellow artists. And it really did feel like heaven, you know. And I think that that's why we romanticize it so much, because it really did feel like freedom at the time, you know, and that anything was possible. So that's why you see a lot of times people want to go back and do things like that, you know. And I feel like to a certain extent, we're kind of like in our own little, like another renaissance, you know,
I
a
would
national
say
renaissance.
globally, it's
It's
kind
a
of the
global,
feeling that
yeah,
that there is a shared feeling of the need to, put in a better place the African diaspora legacy, right, and to
yeah.
recognize
And
it
that's
for what it
and I
is.
think that that's the next thing, is that's global. And I think we talked about this before, but you know, a lot of the things that I do, I love to travel. And so when I travel, I love to connect my art to the culture. So if I'm traveling to Cuba or something, I definitely want to connect with the local people there and take classes. You know, I went to University of Havana and took some modern classes, and then I was able to exchange and teach classes. And I think that the future is connected. It's us connecting to our brothers and sisters across the diaspora, sharing our gifts, you know, finding ways to monetize that benefits both of us, you know. And so that is like a passion of mine, to kind of continue that work, continue connecting with people like you and sharing our stories, you know.
I was gonna ask you, and that's the last question. What is the relationship? Because I told you, right, that I know there has been kind of a problematic or a distance relationship, right, between African diasporic Latinos and African Americans. There's
Yeah.
a distance there. Also, there's a gap. There's a
Uh,
misunderstanding, right? How do you
there
see it?
is. But I also think depending on who you talk to, right? I think that on the one hand, most African Americans and Africans know that Latinos are like, you know, African, you know. Some Latinos don't, they know it, they don't accept it. But I think that that's changing. I think that there's a new wave of the younger generation that they know who they are and they're claiming it. You know, one of
Yeah,
my
some people just lean towards their Hispanic, origin only, because some people only have that. Even though Spain is kind of, it's very
Yeah,
influenced by
But
Africa.
Spain is gonna, right. You got the Moors there, so like, you see what
But
I'm saying? It
but
all
in
is coming from
Spain,
Africa.
you know that there's this debate in Spain and actually across the globe about how African or not